"It is my desire," says he, "that I should chasten them when they shall bind themselves in their two furrows." Hosea 10, verse 10. Alluding to the practice of the husbandman who corrects a refractory steer when caught in the situation described in the metaphor which is employed. The conduct of God toward his ancient people is described under a beautiful allegory in the prophecies of Zechariah. When he saw his flock a prey to their possessors, and sold by their own pitiless shepherds, he exclaimed, "I will feed the flock of slaughter, even you, O ye poor of the flock. And I took unto me 2 staves, the one I called Beauty, and the other I called Bands, and I fed the flock." But they requited him ungratefully. Their soul abhorred him, and his soul loathed them. Then said I will not feed you. That dieth, let it die. And that is to be cut off, let it be cut off. And let the rest eat every one the flesh of another. And I took my staff, even Beauty, and cut it asunder, that I might break my covenant which I had made with all the people. And a little after, then I cut asunder mine own staff, even Bands, that I might break the brotherhood between Judah and Israel. Zechariah 11, verses 7 through 14. The grand schism by which 10 tribes were rent from the house of David was expressly denounced as a punishment for the sin of Solomon and his people in forsaking God. 1 Kings 11, verse 11, as well as 1 Kings 12, verse 15. And when the flame, instead of being extinguished, has fresh fuel added to it and continues to spread and burn from age to age with increasing fury, it is a proof that God's anger is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still, as it was when Manasseh devoured Ephraim, and Ephraim Manasseh, and they together Judah. Isaiah 9, verse 21. Secondly, divisions in the church are owing to various causes. In permitting them, God overrules the instrumentality of men who are actuated by different motives and principles for which they are entirely responsible. It is incumbent on all Christians to endeavor to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. The violation of it must be traced to a sinful cause. When dissensions arise in the Church of God, and it is divided into parties, whatever the occasion of matter of variance be, there must be guilt somewhere. The rules of truth, peace, and holy fellowship have been transgressed, and those who are justly chargeable with this cannot be blameless. Amid the keen contests and opposing pretensions of parties, it may often be difficult to determine where the blame lies. But it must attach to one side or another, and perhaps to both. It will not always attach to the minority, or those who may be forced to withdraw from the assemblies and external communion of particular churches. The major and prevailing party may be the real schismatics, though not the formal separatists. This, however, we know that Scripture has affixed the mark of disapprobation on those who cause divisions and offenses, contrary to the doctrine which we have received. Romans 16, verse 17. The dissensions which prevail in the Church, like those which distract and break the peace of other societies, may be traced in general to the workings of human corruption. Whence come wars and fightings among you? Come they not hence, even of your lusts that war in your members? James 4, verse 1. They spring from the ignorance, error, unbelief, prejudice, pride, passion, selfishness, carnality, which are predominant in the minds of some of the members of the Church, and are but partially subdued and mortified in the minds of the best. To specify all the ways in which these principles operate to the disturbance of the peace of the Church is impracticable. They lead to the adoption and patronage of errors, by which the purity of faith and institutions of Christ is depraved. This in itself, as we have seen, loosens the scriptural bonds of union. But as the faithful consider themselves bound to resist everything of this kind, the propagation of errors cannot fail to excite contention and strife in the bosom of the Church. Some of these errors strike against the principal and leading articles of the faith, and are, in their very nature, damnable and destructive to the souls of those who embrace them. Others consist of uncertain, vain, and unprofitable opinions, the offspring of an unsanctified fancy, or of the love of novelty, calculated to unsettle the minds of the hearers, and inducing perverse disputings and endless questions. Others again strike more immediately against the unity and peace of the Church. Loose and extravagant notions respecting private judgment, conscience, and Christian liberty, by which these rights, invaluable when duly understood and regulated, are explained and stated in such a way as to convert all religion into a matter of individual belief and concern, to render union and cooperation among its professors impracticable or precarious, and to contradict the important truth that the powers which God hath ordained and the liberty which Christ hath purchased are not intended by God to destroy, but mutually to uphold and preserve one another. Westminster Confession of Faith, Chapter 20, Section 4. This is the case when the duty of Christians at large is when the duty of Christians at large is explained in such a way as to encroach on the office of a regular gospel ministry. When the lawfulness of confessions of human composure as public declarations of the faith of a church, and their usefulness as tests of orthodoxy, though conformable in their matter to Scripture, and necessary in times of abounding error among persons professing Christianity, are impugned. When ecclesiastical office-bearers are stripped of that authority which is competent to them, and necessary for preserving order and subordination, and the supreme power of finally determining every cause is lodged with the whole people in every worshipping congregation. When the combination of particular congregations as parts of an extended and organized body, with a duly limited submission to a common judicatory for taking cognizance of differences which may arise in any part of that body, and judging of what concerns the good of the whole, is opposed, and, in fine, to pass over other tests of a similar description, which are rampant in the present age, when the lawfulness of the settlement of a system of religion in a nation by the joint concurrence of ecclesiastical and civil authority, and with the general consent of the people, is contradicted and opposed. Sectarianism, as the class of opinions referred to is usually called, is inimical to the unity of the Church, as it has a direct tendency to foster diversity of sentiment and practice in religion, and to multiply schisms. In the common sense and experience of mankind, if the common sense and experience of mankind did not check its operation and prevent its keenest abettors from acting rigidly and consistently on their own principles, it would lead to the dissolution of all religious society, or at best to the rearing of a Babel, the foundations of which would be laid on its firstborn, and the gates of it set up on its youngest and most favorite son. To these may be added rigid notions respecting ecclesiastical communion, incompatible with the imperfect state of the Church in this world, whether these manifest themselves in requiring that all Christians should reach the same degree of the scale in their acquaintance with divine things, or in withdrawing from the communion of a church on account of particular acts of maladministration, or because discipline may not, in some instances, be exercised on offenders with faithfulness, or with all that severity which they may think proportions to the nature of the offense, which was the error charged on the ancient Novatians and Donatists. Divisions in the Church may often be traced to a spirit of vanity, pride, and ambition. Than this, nothing can be more repugnant of the Spirit of Christ, or prejudicial to ecclesiastical peace. It is often found combined with a spirit of error, and has formed a very prominent feature in the character of heresiarchs and the founders of sects. It displays itself sometimes in an overweening fondness of their own private opinions, and at other times in the love of preeminence, or an impatience of contradiction, by which they are instigated to the adoption of factious and divisive courses. Others are impelled to divide the Church by the base desire of gratifying their avarice, and procuring a livelihood from the disciples whom they draw after them. Such are the unruly and vain talkers and deceivers, described by Paul, who subvert whole houses, described by Paul, teaching things which they ought not for filthy lucre's sake, and those whom another apostle charges with beguiling unstable souls, following the way of Balaam with the son of Bosor, who loved the wages of unrighteousness. Titus 1 verse 11, and 2 Peter 2 verse 15.